Hey everybody, welcome to the Rhinestone Podcast. My name is Banner Driscoll. I am the CEO and founder of Rhinestone Productions. Rhinestone Productions is a virtual music studio with over 25 of the greatest musicians you've ever heard. We have the best team of musicians in the world. I'm not even gonna lie anymore. We have the best team of musicians in the world. And we help people transform their recordings and transform their music careers by having just a really good sense of pre-production, an incredible production team, and then also having world-class mixing and mastering that thinks like a DJ. And if you're curious about what that means, you should hit us up and find out. Hit us up at rhinestonemusic@gmail.com, put the word DJ in there, and I'll tell you more about why we mix and master like a DJ. It's a weird idea, but trust me, it works. It's led to all sorts of playlists. It's gotten artists on the radio. There's a reason we do it this way. It works. And, you know, I don't really have a good segue, but I'm going to tell you, our next guest is one of my favorite musicians out there. He has played with Norah Jones. He's played with Tracy Chapman. If you go to his Wikipedia page and look at all the records he's played with like Mike Love from the Beach Boys, the OJs, Rufus, Wainwright, some amazing stuff. And he's also an incredible band leader and solo musician and educator. That would be the incomparable, incredibly soft-spoken, but every word weighs 1,000 pounds with this guy, Adam Levy. I first found Adam a couple of years ago scrolling Instagram. He's got some viral videos that went viral and was just immediately taken back by his demeanor. You meet a lot of guitar players like myself, and we're loud, we're obnoxious, we're all over the place. And Adam's not like that at all. Every word is soft-spoken. Every word is carefully thought out and articulated and poised. And Adam just has this way of explaining guitar that makes it feel like you could do it. If he can do it, then you can do it. And I love that. And not only has Adam built this incredible body of recording work as a session player, but he's also been a fantastic educator. You can check out his incredible Adam Levy guitar tips on YouTube, which is phenomenal. He's got an incredible Patreon, which we get into a little bit. And the guy's just done all sorts of incredible, amazing things. And so I was really happy to get a chance to talk with him. He really enlightened my eyes on a lot of really cool things. And just some of the stories are phenomenal. For a price of admission alone, which is free, you guys should wait until you hear about what he got to do with Vulfpeck. I know we have a lot of Vulfpeck fans in the house. Vulfpeck is one of my favorite groups of recent memory, like everybody else's. And Adam shares his entire experience of what it was like to work with Vulfpeck. It's wild, it's crazy, just like you would imagine it would be. It was everything you could want and more. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want to have your full attention, and I want you to check out this interview that we did with the incredible Adam Levy right here on the Rhinestone Podcast. Welcome to the Rhinestone Podcast, where we navigate the ins and outs of the music industry. I'm your host, Banner Driscoll, and today we're shining a spotlight on one of my absolute favorite musicians, Adam Levy. If Adam's name doesn't ring a bell, I can guarantee you've heard his guitar magic. From the bluesy, soulful solos on Tracy Chapman's timeless hit, Give Me One Reason, to the ethereal jazz folk fusion of Norah Jones' acclaimed album, Come Away With Me, Adam's distinct sound enriches every track he touches. With a career spanning over 35 illustrious years, Adam has worn many hats. He's shared his expertise as an educator in esteemed music schools, lent his insights as an editor and contributor to Guitar Player magazine, and graced records with a diverse array of artists from Mike Love to Vulfpeck to Rufus, Wainwright, and the OJs. Not to mention his solo jazz ventures and his captivating collaborations with guitarist Rich Hinman in their dual guitar quartet. In 2023 alone, Adam showcased his versatility with the release of String Theories, an educational guitar book, the jazz-infused trio album Spry, and he's gearing up for a release of a dynamic album alongside Rich Hinman in May 2024 called Fan Favorites. And if you're hungry for more of Adam's guitar wisdom, look no further than his weekly rendezvous on YouTube's Guitar Tips with Adam Levy channel, where he generously shares his insights with eager followers. Adam Levy, welcome to the Rhinestone Podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing really, really good, Banner. Thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
I am doing so good, man. Rhinestone has been popping off lately. We've just had a lot of work coming in. Our podcast is doing well, and we're talking to you, man. I'm so excited to have you on. You've just done so much cool stuff, and I think so many people are going to learn a lot of really good things in this podcast.
Right on. Well, let's get into it.
Let's do it. So, Adam, there's a lot of different places we could start with your career. I mean, we could go this way, that way. You've done a bunch of different things, which is awesome. But I think I'm going to start in a little bit of a weird path here. But I think this is going to go someplace really special. So, my first question to you is, who is Ted Green and why is he important to your story?
Hmm. Yeah. Ted Green was a guitar player. Uh, I guess people would call him a jazz guitar player. Really, he loved lots of kinds of music. And when I was first getting serious about the guitar, maybe I was 12 or 13, I heard his name a lot. He was based in LA. I was growing up in LA. So he was somebody who had written books. And of course, you could buy the books uh, anywhere. But beyond that, he was like a real person in the town that I grew up in. And so I knew people who here and there had studied with him or knew somebody who had studied with him. And you just always hear these stories about him. There was only one record. He only made one record. It's called Solo Guitar. And that's really the thing he was known for, playing solo guitar, not in a group, but like, kind of self contained guitar arrangements where you've got the melody and the chords and the bass, and it sounds like a full orchestra on a Telecaster. And so I read some of his books. He probably his best known book is called Chord Chemistry. I got that when I was 13 or 14, and I just uh, squeezed all the juice that I could out of it. There was lots of stuff in there that was over my head, but I tried to figure out what was going on. And he really seemed to have uh, a special way of looking at the guitar and playing the guitar and teaching the guitar. And when I was maybe 16 or 17, a friend of mine was studying with him and said, "Hey, do you want to fill in for me on my lesson this week?" Ted had a funny policy. I've never heard of anyone else doing this, where he mostly just had weekly students. He didn't have a lot of drop-in people, but if you were a weekly student of his and for some reason you couldn't make your lesson that week, rather than rescheduling or canceling or whatever, you could just send a friend so it was real easy for Ted. He knew at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, well, it's supposed to be Steve, but okay, Adam shows up, cool, whatever. It's real easy for Ted to not have to get into you know rescheduling and all that stuff. So that's how I wound up taking a lesson with Ted. And I had other guitar lessons before, but I'd never sat with a teacher who I really thought was really listening to me and really got where I was at. A lot of teachers have kind of a one size fits all curriculum, or maybe you bring them a song you want to learn and they show it to you and it's a little more transactional. But Ted was deeper than that. He really could kind of see where you were on your journey and find ways to help you along. And that was just in one lesson. And then a couple years later, I reached out to him for another lesson. And I only took a handful of lessons from him over the years. I was never one of those weekly guys. But when I moved away from LA, we did a couple of correspondence lessons just through the mail. And he just was so thoughtful and insightful. And so much of the way that I think about playing the guitar and teaching the guitar comes directly from Ted.
What are some of the big insights you learned in those few lessons with him?
Well, one, like I said, was to as far as teaching was, really listen to your students and try to get to the core of what it is that they're curious about and where their strengths are. So that's having to do with teaching, having to do with playing. Uh, he made it seem that just about anything was possible on the guitar. If you really love the guitar and love music, and there's something you want to do on the guitar, uh, just keep at it. And uh, he was just he made things seem possible on the guitar that I would have thought either were impossible or maybe just not worth the effort to try to do. He Because he clearly had done the work. I mean, he seemed so effortless and natural on the guitar. So he was talking from experience. Like he did the work and he played things that would be impossible for anybody else. So but he never held that as like, you know, do what I did. He just by example showed that. And then his sound was just so warm and inviting. Like, I think, uh, I wish there were more recordings of him. All we really have is this one record, and then people have posted on YouTube, some of his gigs or lessons and stuff. But to be in the room and hear his sound was unforgettable. So I try to have a sound that has that kind of warmth and magnetism. I try. Ted really had it.
Was there anything from a more like technical level or like maybe music theory level? Like obviously we're talking big like, oh, be kind, listen to your students and like anything's possible on the guitar, which are great. But is there anything like more from a like mechanical or music theory level? We are talking to musicians here, so feel free to get as nerdy as you want.
Okay. Yeah. So Ted was a real systems based thinker. He, would organize chord voicings into voicing groups, and some would be conventional things like, drop two voicings or, triad inversions. But he also had other systems that were different, and they all made a lot of sense to him. Like in another life, he could have probably been some kind of uh, software engineer or something like that. He really was a very systems based, organized person. So when I first was studying with him, he said something to me about voice leading and the importance of voice leading. When you're going from chord to chord, connecting things, not just going from, well, this is the G that I know and then this is the C minor that I know, but try to find a way to get there, more directly, and so that you're thinking about each note in the chord as a voice and getting from one to the next. That's what voice leading is. And I was so young and insecure that I went home and I tried to voice lead everything because that's what I thought he was talking about. I came back the next lesson and I almost couldn't play. I was so paralyzed by the idea that everything had to be voice led. And he said, no, it's just an idea. Like it's something to work on for your whole life, but don't let it stop you from making music, you know. And even, with all the different organizational tools, voicing groups and these exercises and um if you were somebody who wanted to organize your practice routine around, well, this month or this whatever, I'm working on string set one, 4-part chords, whatever, plug in whatever, technical stuff you want to about, what you're working on. He would be uh all about that. He had already written probably a dozen handouts about anything that you could imagine, separate from his books. I don't know how he had time. He wrote 4 books and also had a file cabinet full of the master documents with multiple copies of just what seemed kind of an impossible amount of material that he had written by hand. He wasn't doing this on a computer. So if you wanted to study a thing and really get into it, any kind of thing. Baroque harmony. I think people think of him as a jazz guy, but he knew a lot about, Bach and Baroque harmony and how to get that stuff going on the guitar, how to improvise in that style. He loved, good pop song. He loved all, a lot of kinds of music. But wherever you wanted to go, he already had been there. You'd think like, I want to go here, and like Ted be like, great, let's get into it. But at the end of the day, uh, he didn't care how much you knew. he just wanted to hear you play. I remember when I moved away and I kept in touch with him through correspondence, I wrote out this arrangement that I had done for a song from West Side Story called Somewhere. There's a place for us somewhere. And I sent it to him, and he wrote back a really nice letter with some, notes. But the takeaway from that letter was, look, if you want to do this, you have to send me a cassette because it doesn't matter what's on the page. I need to hear you play it. And I guess that was really what the take. I don't know if that's any more technical than be kind, but what it, at the end of the day, Ted was happy to go down any rabbit hole that you'd ever want to go down on the guitar. But if it didn't, if the journey didn't ultimately lead you to making some soulful music, then uh, it wasn't that interesting to him, and I try to take that with me.
For those who want to learn more about Ted's methods, where would you suggest someone go? I know he's got a ton of stuff online, the books. Where would you suggest?
Um, Depends on the kind of person you are. Uh, if you like books, then my favorite book of his four is called Modern Chord Progressions. I think you could just hang out with that book for a really long time and keep going back to it for over years. Um, if a book is not your thing and you just like, oh, I want a little a la carte snack. Like I'm really curious about triad inversions, or I really just want to find a cool arrangement of Georgia on my mind, then go to the website. I mean, Ted has passed on, but the somebody's built a website for his. It's like a repository of all the Ted Green stuff. So you could search around for some really super specific thing, and it would just be one page, a PDF. You could print that out or look at it on screen or whatever, and spend as much time with just that thing as you want to. So depends on if you want a snack or if you want kind of an all-you-can-eat situation.
What are you practicing these days?
Uh, 90% of what I'm practicing is just two things. This is my New Year's resolution, was to focus my practice and try to be less scattered, um, or less unrealistically ambitious about all the things that I could or should be practicing. So I'm practicing some music that J.S. Bach originally wrote for solo violin. There are these six pieces. Three of them are called partitas, and three of them are called sonatas. And it's music written for violin, but it's all playable on the guitar. And it's so beautiful to just sit and play Bach for an hour in the morning. Um, so I do that. And then there was a book by a guy named Jimmy Weibel, who was my other teacher when I was a kid. And I have one of his books that I play out of. There's a bunch of real short little exercise things, and then six etudes, which are, you know, pieces of music to play.
How do you arrange your practice sessions? Is it a daily thing? Is it when you can? Are you structured? I think a lot of people, when they are trying to get better at music, obviously practicing is one of the things, and it's hard. Nobody likes doing it. It's like going to the gym, But if you do put the work in daily, you get better and better. How do you practice your how do you practice? And then any tips or tricks to help build a better rhythm for people so they can practice more consistently?
Hmm. Yeah. Consistent practice. I don't think it's just some like woo woo idea. Uh, in my experience, doing it and as a teacher and talking with my peers and seeing people interviewed on podcasts like this one, everybody agrees like do something consistent, whatever that is. Um, if you can only do 20 minutes a day because your life is that way, okay, but then really do it. And uh, I find it helpful if you can do it at the same time. But yeah, it's really like going to the gym or whatever. You just put it in your schedule and you show up and you do it day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. That is not the way a lot of people want to do things, but that's how real progress is made. If you don't care about progress and you're like, I'm just, I like to pick up my guitar and fool around for, 20 minutes after work when I get home, that's fine. No shame in just picking it up to play it for fun. That's cool. But if you actually want to see progress and be a better guitar player a year from now than you are now, then I think you actually should focus on just a handful of things. Like, be honest with yourself, do the work where the work is needed. Don't be driven by some dude on YouTube who did some fantastic thing that you're like, oh, I got to figure that out. Um, that's more, I think, for the weekend warriors. Uh, I think, if you're trying to really get somewhere on the guitar, you can't be distracted by uh, something that's not. You want to really draw a circle around what's important to you and make all of your practice time about that and try to eliminate other things. And then, maybe one day a week you give yourself a free day and you play just for fun. But I think you make more progress by doing fewer things and being systematic and repeat, 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 repeat. That's where you see real progress.
So now, as a musician, there's a lot of different things you can practice, right? Obviously, I mean, the list is infinite, right? Like we've, I've met people who've been playing for 60 years and they're still like, I got to learn this, or they're like, Ted Green, where they're still learning and raising the bar. For an effective practice session, how much of the practicing should be learning tunes, maybe music theory, scales in chords and versions? How much of it should be mechanical stuff? So, like your picking technique. What mindset do you think those things take up your time? I guess in a practice session.
Yeah. Uh, I would say picking technique for me is the thing I think about the least. Uh, I, I don't even know what my system is. Some people are like, "Oh, well, there's down up picking, there's economy picking, etc." I don't really have a system of that. It's never been my focus. So as far as like that part of technique, I would say that's the small. That's not even a piece of the pie. It's like a crumb or something of the pie. But I do think about finger picking technique because it's something that I came to later. Like, for the first 20 years I played guitar, I really, other than playing Blackbird or something, I mostly was playing with a pick. And then when I started getting into, I still don't have like a super solid technique, but sometimes I think like this is the whole machine. This is all you need, just thumb and index. That's what Merle Travis did. Lots of guitar players that I admire just do this. My friend Chris Bruce in New York, incredible guitar player, does stuff with just thumb and index that seems impossible to me. So then I go and I add, this finger. And then sometimes I go through the Giuliani 120 arpeggios for the right hand. Mauro Giuliani was a Italian guitarist, composer, and he wrote this 120 etudes series and so that's for classical guitar. So now you're using all of this. And so if I feel like I'm getting rusty with being able to do stuff with my right hand, I'll either go to the Giuliani book or, practice something, you know, from a record that I've heard, or just try to, spend some time making music with any one of these, right hand combinations. So over time, I would say that's probably like 10 to 15% of what I work on. Um, I work on time feel, groove feel. So that might be put on a metronome or a drum machine or some kind of loop and just play with it, something simple, and just try to make it feel good, uh, which is harder than it ought to be. uh, but I spend probably 10 to 15% of my practice time just doing that to make sure that, and I like to do that at the beginning of a practice session so that if I start out by trying to make things feel good, feel settled, feel fun, funky, uh, pocket, if you want to use that word, um, then everything else I do the rest of the practice session is going to be built on that foundation. And so that would be something I would do at the top. Sometimes I don't have a pick here, but I have a paper clip. So just imagine it's a pick. Sometimes I'll just start a practice session with a drum loop or metronome and just play quarter notes for 5 minutes and then play some eighth notes and maybe try to do something, make some kind of 2 bar rhythmic phrase or 4 bar rhythmic phrase and do that. And really just get into the time. So that's my warm up these days. I don't have like a arpeggio or scale warm up routine. I'm warming up to me is more about time feel, about hearing what I'm playing. So sometimes I'll just start and go up and down one string. So I'm really tuned into the intervals. Like, yeah, this is what a perfect fourth is like. And this is what a minor sixth is like. And this is what an octave is like before I start doing it across the string. And then I have to do the same thing going this way so that I'm really tuning into what is the sound in my head, what's a melody that I want to play on the guitar, and play it real slowly and confidently, so that as I pick up the pace, I'm not letting my fingers get ahead of my ears. And then so that could be maybe we're 35 minutes into if I have an hour. So I'm doing just time stuff, which could be with a pick or with my fingers. Then connecting my ear to the guitar. So I'm playing what I'm hearing in my head. And then after that, I might work on, yeah, some Bach or some Jimmy Weibel, or I might transcribe something. Yesterday, I transcribed. Uh, there's a John Coltrane. There's a record that John Coltrane made called Coltrane Plays the Blues, and there's a tune on there called Mr. Sims, which is kind of just like a blues in C minor, but it's all these kind of upper structure things. Uh, and I've heard that record for years, never bothered to figure out what the harmony was, and I got curious about it. So I might do something like that where I transcribe it, and I do put it on paper. It's not just play it, but I want to see it so I can think about it.
What is the most beneficial thing in your career that you've spent the most time practicing? And what have you practiced that has been the biggest waste of time?
Wow. Um, Playing along with records, I think, is the most beneficial thing you could do, that I have done anyway. Uh, that's different from transcribing where I want to look at it on the page. Really, I just want to join the band. And so that's changed over the years. When I was, younger, I wanted to join the Beatles. So I would just play along with those records and try to play the guitar parts and try to get the sound and the feel and notice when the guitar part would stop and there, would lay out and then come back in, or, just, yeah. And then over time, I got into jazz and other stuff and whatever. But yeah, playing along with records because it's the closest thing that you have to playing with a band. Playing with iReal Pro or something like that is okay as a tool, but I think you learn more from playing along with records because then you hear what it's really going to be like when when you show up and play with people, or it's as close as you. So that's the most beneficial thing that I've spent my time doing, and I went away from it. I'm coming back more to it now. The biggest waste of time, Uh, uh, this will not every. Oh, you just well, so me personally, I think arpeggios are. Uh, I don't want to say a waste of time, but in the way that I play, I find that they're not for the amount of emphasis that they get in music school. Let me put it that way. For the amount of emphasis that arpeggios get in music school, um, I find them to be, I heard some comedians say this, like, when I was a kid, I was prepared for that when I grew up, there was going to be a lot of quicksand, and that was going to be a big issue in my life. And of course, that's how arpeggios are to me. I use them, they are part of music, but I don't think they're that big of a deal. Somebody else might say the same thing about the modes, right? Like, really? When do you use Phrygian in real life? So I'm just saying for me, somebody else might say arpeggios are invaluable and I use them. Where would I be without them? But I find them to be overemphasized in school and not all that important to me. And if I could have those hours back, I would gladly have them back.
Subscribe button. So one of the things I love about you, and I haven't really heard you talk about, you mentioned it a little bit, is your sense of rhythm is unbelievable. You have, whether it's Norah Jones, whether it's Tracy Chapman, your solo records, the stuff you've done with Rich Hinman, uh, your time and feel are so in. I mean, you are not the quantized guitar player of 2024. You are. I mean, you're behind the beat, you're in front of the beat, you're on top of the beat, below the beat, and I love it. It's one of the things I think that really makes you stand out as a guitar player. So my question is how do you practice that rhythm, playing softly in those rhythms? Because that's another thing I love about you is you play very soft. And is that something you could practice on another instrument?
That's interesting. Um, the latter part about another instrument, I don't know. I like because I don't really play other instruments, so I don't know the mechanics of it. That's a neat thing about the guitar is that you can play it, the dynamic of how quietly you can play it and still get a sound out of it is pretty incredible. Uh, I don't know if that's true of saxophone or piano or human voice even. Uh, but I started practicing softly partly just because I've always lived in apartment buildings and not wanted to bother my neighbors. So that's part of it. And I also found that I could get a it's one way, it's not the only way, but it's one way to get a warm sound on the electric guitar anyway, is to like turn the amp up a little bit more than you think you need to, and then just play softer and excuse me, let the amplifier do some of the work for you. You know, it's that's part of what it's there for is to amplify. I mean, that's ostensibly all it's there to do is to amplify. That's why it's called an amplifier. So by opening up the amp a little bit and then just playing lighter, I could get this kind of warm sound that I liked. I don't know if that translates to other instruments. So that was the back half of your question, and then the time part. Um, I've been really lucky to be almost always surrounded by great drummers ever since I was just starting out. Um, I mean, especially not when I was just starting out in high school. I don't know if those were great drummers because none of us were great. But once I started playing professionally, there were always really great drummers around, and I was fascinated by how different drummers could make music feel so different. Um, on records, different, like, in a way the drummer makes the record because they make the time feel and they make the dynamic. And um I'm just endlessly fast. So since I don't play the drums, I try to bring that to the guitar and play in a way that, yeah, it has some push and pull to it. It's not on the grid. When I'm playing, rhythm behind somebody else, I try to be a more, if not on the grid, at least gritty enough to where they know that they can rely on me. That, if they're going to lean into something that's going to land here, they trust that I'm going to be there when they get there. But in between here and there, things can push and pull. And then when I'm soloing, that push and pull is coming, I think, from a different place. So the rhythm stuff just comes out of, listening to records with Jim Keltner and Levon Helm and just great drummers that do that. Earl Palmer. Uh, but then soloing, it had more to do with, assuming that the rhythm section is doing that. I want to look for places. I'm kind of bobbing and weaving, and I found that if I tried to play straight up and down, rhythmic, like lines that are like, this is an eighth note, this is a triplet, this is a 16th note, like, um, that what would happen is some of it would just cancel out because everybody's playing the eighth notes or the 16th note, or it's like if you're improvising and you play the root of the chord, that's cool, but probably there's two or three other people in the band, the bass player, the piano player. A lot of people are on that note, so it doesn't have great impact, that note, unless maybe you sort of lead us there in some way, and that's like the punchline to this story. But if you just have somebody vamping and you play the root, you're doesn't really make anything happen. So the same I found was, and so in that case, maybe you'd play the nine or the some other note in the chord that actually tells a story. I found the same to be true rhythmically, that if I just play where all the beats are, a lot of what I do kind of cancels out because other people are there. So I've tried to, in the way that harmonically you might want to play something colorful, rhythmically, I found those kind of in between places also to be uh, uh, valuable real estate.
You have a very distinct style when it comes to studio playing. I mean, it's again like we talked about. You have just as soon as you're on a record, and I started listening to a lot of the records on your Wikipedia page that you've been a sideman on, and it's as soon as I start to hear you more and more, it's like, okay, that's Adam Levy. That's Adam Levy. Does your playing change when you are in the studio versus playing live?
It does. Uh, and to be honest, I wish it didn't. Um, Sometimes I think in the studio I overthink it. I overthink it. I overthink what am I supposed to do here? Whereas like on a stage, I might be more in the moment and more kind of vibing off of the singer or the audience or you know somebody in the studio. It's hard because, well, I mean, one thing that's hard is oftentimes you're isolated, you're in a little room by yourself, so it's harder to like read people's body language and see how they react. Or sometimes I'm just by myself in this room overdubbing something for somebody and I just have no idea how anything's landing. And so much for me about the musical experience is playing with people and exchanging energy and finishing each other's uh, sentences and stuff. So in the studio, on a good day, I can be loose and play the way that I do live. And I guess it kind of works the other way too. Sometimes maybe live I'm too loose, and that there's a certain kind of thing that being in the studio could inform the live playing, which is if you play something earlier, bring it back around. Like on records, that's a cool thing. Like, oh, the thing that the guitar player did in the first verse, maybe they'll bring that back around in the third verse. Or you tend to think more about the arc on in a recording session because it is what it is. There's this 3.5, 4 minutes of whatever, and it's preset, and you're trying to kind of fill that space in a particular way. Whereas live things tend to be more open ended, and so I guess it is a two-way thing. Uh, but to answer your question, no, I don't think I play the same in both environments.
That's a really interesting take. I think a lot of people have this idea that I see this a lot because, especially as a producer, where people will see something that works live and then they'll bring it to the studio and it just doesn't work on the recording at all. And you have to change parts and you have to rewrite the song and cut sections and stuff like that. So I always think that is like, I think they're two very different arts in my opinion. Yeah. So I'm a music producer. I produce records and help people out. And even from our emails and your content and stuff like that, I could tell you have a very kind, gentle demeanor. Your voice is very soothing, and I could see why producers would have you as a guy in the studio, because being in the studio is chaotic. It's crazy. It's wild. It'll drive you mad if you don't know what you're doing or don't have the right people around. And I could see why having you as a calming influence in the studio would be something that people would want to have. How important is it to have a good attitude when it comes to getting gigs as a sideman, whether that be in the studio or live?
Uh, well, I'm sure that you are what you've said about me. Like for me, I think it is part of why people hire me. Uh, I hope that people would hire me just based 100% on uh, guitar playing. But I do, I mean, people have said as much to me, so I don't think I'm just projecting this. That people sometimes just hire me, yeah, because like you say, that's who they want to be around. And in the intense studio environment, it's nice to have somebody around uh, who is calm. But I don't know that that's the right move for everybody. I mean, I think there's a certain aspect of professionalism that you should have. So, whatever your personality is, you still have to like show up on time and have gear that works. And if there was something to prepare in advance, you need to have done it. But whether you are somebody with a hot temper or a cool demeanor or somebody who's funny or serious or whatever, I think that's I don't think that's a one size fits all uh, thing. And in the little tiny bit of producing I've done, I can think of times where I might hire somebody to do something on a record, knowing that, well, they're just going to be here for 3 hours, and it may it may be a drag, but when they leave, we're going to have that thing that they do on the record, and it might be worth 3 hours of eye rolling or whatever it takes to to make the record be what it is that you want it to make. I find that the calm demeanor thing to be even more important actually on the road, where you're in a van with somebody for hours and having to get up early to catch a flight, and um, people are at the edge of what they can do as far as how little sleep they've gotten, and living on takeout food for weeks, and missing their families and all that stuff. That gets to be, you get to see the, the edges of people on the road. I find even more than in the studio. But you're a producer, so you see it more than I do. Um, and that's where a calm demeanor, I think, really comes in handy. And I think about that when I'm going to go on the road. If I was going to take a band on the road, it's a different calculus. Making a record, the record just has to be great. But if I'm going to spend that many hours with people, it's almost the inverse, because then on a tour, the live show is 75 minutes, but then you have this
Yeah.
other rest of the time that you're together.
Yeah, you have that other 23 and a half or 23 hours to deal with that person. I
Yeah.
I 100%, like, I've been a studio rat for years. I just cannot. I've had offers to go on the road, and I just, I need my sleep. I need my food. I need my wife. I respect people who can do it. I respect the road warrior, but that's just not the life for me. So, but I could 100% see how nice that would be to have, is to have someone who's nice all the time and is encouraging. We interviewed Greg Howe a couple months back, who great guitar player, played with Michael Jackson and Enrique Iglesias, a bunch of other people, and he said that was 100% what big pop star band leaders are looking for. Because in what he said was his music director, who he was tight with and he did a bunch of gigs with, would say um, that there's a million people who could play the parts, but there's only one or two who can do it, and you want to also hang out with them afterwards. And it's just like, he's like, because again, like you said, there's calls, there's flights, there's bus calls, there's hotel calls, there's meal times, and you don't want somebody who you can't trust and rely on, who doesn't show up for stuff. So I always tell people is, like, especially when I do consults, is like having a good attitude and being kind to people, and being a good hang is so important as a musician, especially if you want a career. Mhm. So let's say I'm a producer and I call you for a session for a singer, you know, and pick in your mind whoever. How do you prepare for a studio session as a sideman?
That is a really good question. And I'll tell you what I do. I don't know if it's what other people do or anyone else should do, but I um, try to get to know the music as best as, if there's demos, I like to get to hear them. I may not pick up a guitar and try to figure out what's going on the demos, because uh, I don't want to get demo-itis, where if there's something going on that I have a sense like, oh, they're going to want me to play that thing, then yeah, I'll try to figure out what it is. But if it's just, I'm just trying to hear, oh yeah, it goes A minor, B minor, D, G, does that four times, and then this other, like, what I'm really trying to get at is like, what is, how do the songs work? What's the structure of the songs? Even though they may change in the studio, I want to get a sense of the verses go like this and the choruses go like that. Um, if I can get the lyrics, I always ask for them. I want to know what the songs are about, because songs are not about A minor, B minor, D, G. That's not what songs are about. They're about stories and emotion. So I try to get the lyrics if I can. Um, I, I may fish around on YouTube and see if there are any uh, clips of the person performing, even if it's not that song, just to get a real clear image for myself of like who they are, and what they do. Um, that's getting to know the artist. If I can, I'd also want to know about the producer. What are their tendencies? What kind of records do they make? And uh, a lot of times I'll chart stuff out. Not anything fancy, but just I'll make little charts, because a lot of times sessions, they don't have charts, or they have charts that are sketchy. So I'll make my own sketchy charts, and the process of making the sketchy charts helps me internalize the song. A lot of times I'll just put on the music and listen to it while I'm doing something else, and just try to get it past the front part of my brain and into the, you know, into the part of my brain where all my favorite songs live, which is kind of farther. I mean, this is not brain science, but it's just how I imagine it.
Of those things you you gonna say more? Okay. Of all those things that you mentioned, which are musts for you?
Um, hmm.
Or does it just differ between each session?
It differs. It differs between each session. I think if there's one must, it would it would really be just bring the best version of you that you can. Uh, Maybe that means getting a good night's sleep. Maybe that means just going to the gym before the session or taking your supplements or whatever. Like, the best thing that you can do is be present. I do all these other things because I have a lot of anxiety. I don't want to show up unprepared. Like, I literally have bad dreams about that all the time, being on a gig or a session and being unprepared. But in the dreams, it's always like, oh, my guitar is here, but there's no strings on it. Or uh, the guitar is in another hotel across town, or like things like that. But that stuff is pretty easy to control. Like, or to get a handle on anyway in real life. But what takes, I think, more intention is just being present. So all of the work of making charts or going on YouTube or all of the kind of like, you know, recon missions are great if you're into that. But the best thing you could do is just show up and be present. You never know what's going to happen, and you might have prepared for something. Oh, we're not doing that song, or whatever, that song doesn't have guitar on it, or whatever. You just have no idea. So just take care of yourself, show up early, and be present and pay attention, and go forward.
I love it. I think that's really good advice because, like you said, being in the studio, things can flip in a second. You know, it goes from like you said, like, oh, well, actually, we decided we don't want guitar on that song, or and the studio can is really you have to be the best producers I've ever seen. They have an ability to move quickly from a direction. They try something out, doesn't work. We move next quickly to the next thing, and so it's that's what is why a lot of people can't do it. Even great performers, they can't get into the studio and they can't make a great record. The other thing I wanted to comment on because you mentioned it was the nightmares of sessions because I felt that so much. I cannot tell you how many times I'm as a session I'm just like, oh man, that snare. We didn't do that snare right. We got to retract the drums, man. And then they love it. The client loves it. But I'm like, oh, the keys. Why did we choose that B3 lever? It's so real.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so what can producers and artists do to make your job as a session musician easier? So let's say I called you for a session and I got a singer working with, and I said, I need Adam Levy. I want that Adam Levy sound on my record. What can I do as a producer to make your job as a session musician easier?
Mm. Uh, be as honest as possible, moment to moment. If something is working, uh, let me know. If something's not working, let me know. Um, I think that kind of calmness that I try to bring, it's great if the artist it's rare that the artist is calm. I mean, that's the temperament of an artist, They're yeah. But if the producer can be there kind of as ballast, um but yeah, I'll, at this point in my career, I mean, it's a nice thing in a way. Like, people are a little bit deferential, like, oh well, Adam Levy's here. Let's just let Adam Levy do his thing. But I really appreciate um, feedback and honesty, and so it's kind of, we all have to be uh, mindful of how we share the feedback so that we're not like shutting each other down. But yeah, I really like it when there's a particular thing that somebody wants, and if they can help me get there with them, I'm really open to to feedback. And if not, if they really honest to goodness are like, man, anything you play is going to be cool, you know, then I would say go take a walk, or you know, seriously, it's really helpful to have people there that are helping guide the what needs to happen. And it's not helpful if there's conflicting opinions, or just small talk or chatter. So that's what I would really like. Just real clarity. What are we here to do? Let's do it. And if you have something specific, please tell me. And if you don't, then just, yeah, let me do my thing, and then you can take it and do whatever you want. A lot of times people will edit it later. I know that. They'll chop it up, mute things, emphasize things that I thought were little tiny things, all that stuff, and that's fine. I don't ask for final approval on anything I play on. You know, it's your record.
I oh man, there's so much good stuff there. I definitely I think as a someone who has to give a lot of feedback to musicians. I understand like that clarity and vision is really important, and that's one of the things we emphasize at Rhinestone is like before we do any instrument, whether it's a drums, whether it's cello, whether it's theremin or accordion, we ask artists for 3 to 4 references, and we really try to nail down because I don't want to waste the musician's time. It's like your time's valuable. You could be spending time at home with your cat or whatever, and so yeah, I think that's always really important to be able to have that clarity. Now when dealing with producers, sometimes we're not the most friendly people. um when giving that feedback back to you, is there a good way to give feedback and a bad way to give feedback in the studio from a producer to a session musician?
Hmm. Uh, I think there is. I'm not sure how to articulate it. Uh, I mean, I would try to focus on the things that are working, and yeah, let's do more of that. And um, if something is just plain old not working, uh, I mean, it's great if you like, if you say, if you ask the artist for 3 or 4 references for something they're trying to get at, it might be worth it to share some of that with the session players. Also, I would really encourage players and also producers. Players need to go into the booth maybe more often than they do, and hear how the music actually sounds. Like if you're just in the tracking room and you make up your headphone mix in a way that helps you play for the thing, that's cool. But if you're not hearing the part in proper perspective, then you're not. And so I would say something a producer could do that would be helpful is say, hey, why don't you come in here and listen? And sometimes the musician will say, no, let me just do one more. And you have to be really a good kind of people person to. I think that would be almost, if not the number one thing, the number two thing is like, come in, let's listen together, because as long as this you're on different sides of the glass, then it's hard. I think it's hard to get on the same page.
Yeah, I have a producer friend who calls it the peasant. Was it the peasant master relationship, where the master's is behind the glass wall and
Yeah, yeah, but there's just like one door. Like you could go in there. I mean, the the king is still the king or whatever. But like yeah, that's just unfortunately, I think that's always going to be a part of the studio environment. But the more that any of the session players can go in and try to hear what the producer's hearing and what the artist is hearing, um, I think that gets you closer to um, being productive.
so you've done a ton of session work. Someone goes on your Wikipedia, they can see all the different works you've done. Um, Now, two of the more famous ones that you have done are, of course, you've worked with Tracy Chapman. You did the soloing on "Give Me One Reason." I mean, it won a Grammy. I mean, it's amazing. You've also worked with Norah Jones's acclaimed album "Come Away with Me." You worked on her follow up. Um, I'm not going to talk about those records. And the reason why is because there's a million interviews with you where you've gone over great detail with those records. I highly recommend the Vertex interview with you did with Vertex Effects. We will link to that in the show notes here. Um, and again, there's that's much better footage. You're showing playing the parts. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's great. However, there is a session I am very curious about, and I don't think a lot of people have talked about this artist and their methods of working in the studio, and that is Vulfpeck. You got to play on El Chepe from the Beautiful Game LP with Vulfpeck, which you did with your musical partner Rich Hinman. I, like every other musician on this earth, is obsessed with Vulfpeck, and I want to know everything. How did you get the call? Was there rehearsal, charts? Was there a demo? How did they get in touch with you? What was the session like? I want to hear it all.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So before that happened, I was a big Wolfpack fan from YouTube. Um, the few that I remember specifically, really, they did one with talk boxes where they were, with the talk box tube thing that I thought was amazing. They sang, I forget what it is, but they're singing like this kind of barbershop harmony or vocal quartet harmony with talk boxes, and it's amazing. They did one where they mashed up uh, Bernard Purdy like instructional drum video with an instructional uh, gospel piano video made by somebody else at a different, but it somehow synced up, and they had this crazy mashup that was incredible. And then just their songs. I'd seen one of those that they did with Blake Mills, and I loved the crazy cinematography. The way it just is, they made this incredible music, and they looked like they were having so much fun, and everybody was, multi-talented. You'd watch one video and Theo Katzman would be playing drums, and then he'd be playing guitar, and then he'd be singing, and it's just crazy. Who are these people? I was obsessed. And that little theme song that would open up, all their
No,
videos.
no, 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 no. Yeah,
It's genius. It's
iconic,
amazing.
iconic.
Iconic. Absolutely. So I was living in LA. I live in New York now. I'm in Brooklyn. This is where I live. But from like 2013 or 14 until 2020, I was living in LA, and my friend Rich Hinman, longtime friend, was also living there. And we would play at this bar in Highland Park, LA. The bar is called the York, if anybody wants to check it out. And we would play there, and it turned out that like Jack Stratton lived not too far from there, and Theo lived not too far from there, and those guys started coming to our shows. And it was kind of like, oh wow, was wild because I mostly knew them from YouTube, and also there was a coffee shop. So I was also living not in Highland Park, but very close by, and I would sometimes see Jack at my local coffee shop in the morning, just like sitting there with his laptop and headphones on, working on I don't know what. And I think at one point I introduced myself. I was like, "Hey, you're Jack Stratton?" He's like, "Yeah." And so we chatted in the coffee shop for a couple minutes, and then they started coming to our shows. And then one day Theo called me up and he's like, "Hey, would you and Rich want to do a video with us?" And Rich and I were like, "Oh yeah, sure." And then all the stuff I was talking about earlier of like wanting to prepare and like, okay, cool. Is there a demo? Are there charts? What are we going to do? Very little information. I think at one point maybe Jack sent us, or Theo sent us from Jack, like that kind of choo choo train beat, the thing that you hear at the beginning, this sounds like a train, choo choo, the rhythm. Like they basically, I think they wanted something that was sort of like a cross between J.J. Cale and an old fashioned train sound beat. And so I heard like just a little bit of that rhythm it before we got there, but that was about it, really. And now that I think of it, maybe they didn't even send it in advance. Maybe they just said show up, and maybe that's something that Jack sang to us in the room. I can't remember, but almost no information up front. They just told Rich and I show up at this studio. It was a studio we had never heard of, this little funky small studio in Echo Park, and they just said, "Yeah, bring whatever you need." So I brought my ES335 and my amp, and Rich brought his pedal steel and his amp. And Jack sang us through what it was, and he told me to double. There was a bass part that uh, I'm spacing on his name. Yeah, thank you. So it's just doom, 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 doom. Doom, doom, boom, boom, doom, doom, doom. So they wanted me to double that in the A section, so I did that. And then there were these stop time things, and I think for Rich, they just told him just play fills throughout. So there's like a specific piano part that Woody was playing, and everybody's parts were really specific. I guess it's obvious if you listen to their music because Jack is really an arranger, like of course, but I somehow was still surprised at how specific, like just play this part, you don't have to do anything else, and if everybody does their thing, it's going to feel great. Jack is really a incredible at the way that parts interlock. He's a great arranger, and that's what makes him a great producer, is he's a great arranger. And once we had sort of, okay, this is the A section, this is the B section, we were all set up like kind of in a circle in the studio, which is a tiny room, not much bigger than this, with gear all over and like three guys with GoPro cameras. And we did one take, and uh, Jack was like, "Yeah, the stop time thing. Let's change that so that instead of it being this, it's that." And we did two takes, and that was it. They're like, "Great, thank you." And Rich and I were just like, "Wait, we've been in the room like 25 minutes, and we're done." Like it was amazing. And then um, that's what you see and that's what you hear. I mean, it was really like take two of two. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Was so
Yeah.
so so I didn't know this, but so Jack arranged the tune as far as you know.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
and it literally was just like you went in almost blind. Like you may have had a demo, may have not had a demo, and Jack just says like, "I just want you to double the bass part," and you go for it. I mean, so it was. I mean, because so in the video, if you guys watch, which we'll link to in the comments, um, like it doesn't look like there's any charts. Doesn't look like there's anything. No form in front of you guys. Nothing. Um, so it was. I mean, did you just know the form in your head? I mean, it doesn't even sound like you practiced it or rehearsed it at all.
Yeah, it was a real lesson in, like, I mean, this is maybe to what I was saying before, is like this was a case where there was no recon. Like there was nothing that all I could do really if I wanted to was watch some of their other videos and get a sense of like, okay, well, it's going to ultimately look and feel something like this. But the particular song we were going to do, there was no information, no key. Um, I don't think there was a reference point to, like you said, you try to give, to get artists to give you a reference point. We had almost nothing to go on. So all I could really do was show up and pay attention. And luckily, I've been playing music long enough to where um, a song like that I can just uh, follow by paying attention, um, and Rich is the same. It's an essential skill, I think, for musicians, is to, once you hear something once, you need to be able to, to play it. Uh, so the first take was really the rehearsal, and then when Jack made some adjustments, we just had to keep it in our head. And I don't know how you practice that or cultivate it, but it's really essential, because there won't always be charts, and sometimes there'll be charts and they're wrong, uh, or you forgot to bring the charts or whatever. And there's a room full of musicians and some dudes with cameras, and we weren't going to get a third take. I didn't know that at the time, but they knew that. They were just trying to get something that felt alive, and so they didn't want to go past two takes. So we just did it. It didn't seem particularly hard or special. It was just like, oh, cool, we're doing this thing. uh, I would, if you're a young musician and you're trying to be a studio person, like, that's really something to work on, is to hear something once and be able to play it. Um, I don't know how to work on it except to just keep doing it.
So one of the things about Vulfpeck I really love is obviously like their camaraderie and their personalities come through. I mean, every Vulfpeck fanatics like myself, and I'm assuming you are. We know all the little things. We know about Joe Dart's head bopping. We know about Jack Stratton's sense of humor. Corey Wong's amazing guitar playing. Did you feel any of that camaraderie going in? I mean, was it a good vibe in the studio? I mean, it sounds like it was really quick. Like it seems like you got in, got out. Is that the case?
We got in, got out, but yeah, I could feel that those guys had a very natural camaraderie with each other, and they were very easy to invite us in. It wasn't like us versus them in any kind of way. Like they, for that, I say 25 minutes, maybe we were there an hour, I don't know. But all the time we were in that room, they made us feel like we were part of that band. We were Wolfpack at that moment. And I don't know how they did that, but that's how they made me feel. You could ask Rich the same thing. And and then we saw them before that and after that. Like I said, they had come to some of our shows, half, not Joe, but Jack and Theo, um, and, and maybe some other folks from their kind of circle of people. Um, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to be around them. They really love each other and respect each other, and um, anybody who's been around them, I think, would feel feel that.
Now, when you finished the session, um, was it like, thank you, bye, we'll be in touch, or was there like hanging out, listening to it afterwards after you got the take, reviewing footage? Were they doing any of that on site, or was it? I mean, were you out in an hour like you said?
Something like that. I remember, yeah, loading out and Rich and I just kind of looking at each other like, huh, you know? Yeah, no, we didn't sit around with them, and I don't even know if they did any reviewing or further production that day, or if that was strictly about capturing. I would guess that at least they, made sure that they had what they needed, but I don't remember hanging out, after they got the take. I don't think we were there much longer. Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll ask about Vulfpeck was so one of the things I've heard from other musicians who've played with them is that they don't also, as much as they don't give you any information going in, apparently they don't give you any information about when it's going to come out. They just drop it randomly. Did they give you any sort of info about it afterwards, or they send? I mean, I'm assuming they're not going to ask you for approval of mix or anything like that. Um, was it just they just dropped it without telling you, or did they know? Was there any build up, any press?
Not not that I recall. I just, you know, down the road a little bit, a couple months, I don't remember, at some distance down the road, I think I looked on YouTube to see if it was there, and it's there, and there's like a one of those kind of like uh it's I'm the
Yeah,
thumbnail.
you are. You're the thumbnail.
um no, I mean, I didn't feel like they were being cagey about it. It's just, they're in Jack, excuse me, Jack does his thing, and uh yeah, no, we didn't get a lot of information, really. It was fine. Like, I was excited about it, of course, but um I didn't need to know, oh, it's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern time on this date. There's going to be a YouTube premiere. Like, we didn't know anything like that. It's just, oh, one day it's there, and then it's on the record, and um, it's wild.
Summer view. So speaking of the Wolfpack song, you did that with Rich Hinman. Your quartet with Rich Hinman is incredibly fascinating to me because guitars occupy a similar range. And for those who don't know, Rich Hinman is I believe he's in New York City now. Is he? New York City?
No, he lives in Massachusetts in a town called Salem.
Okay, so we'll say the Northeast, um, and he is an incredible guitar player and also a phenomenal pedal steel player. His pedal steel playing is incredible. Um, so with you two playing, how do you two stay out of each other's way as guitar players in a quartet? Because I feel like your playing demands a lot of space. If you listen to your solo records, your organ trio stuff, Spry, your latest record, your guitar playing commands space. And while it may seem very simple, the fact is, um, what's it's not only what's going on with your guitar playing, but what's going on around it. So to have two guitar players in that scenario playing against each other, I am very curious about how you guys stay out of each other's way. Because there are times where, obviously there's times where one's playing chords, one's doing the melody, and vice versa. But there's other times you guys are playing on right on top of each other, and it works. It's incredible. How do you guys stay out of each other's way as guitar players?
Um, it's what I imagine it must be like for people that are part of like an improvising uh, theater group or comedy group or something, where there's, first of all, I have a lot of awareness of Rich and where he's coming from. I've known him for a long time, and we've played a lot of music together. So one thing is, I really know his tendencies and his language and his sound. And I think he would say this the same of me. So one is just familiarity. Um, and sometimes we get into the things like you said, like, okay, you play high, I'll play low. You play sustained, I'll play rhythmic. You play on the grid, I'll play off the grid. Those are places we can always go as a starting point. Uh, you play the melody, I'll play the chords, whatever. So there's always some kind of basic way that we stay out of each other's way by assuming roles that are musical roles that are clear, or frequency roles that are clear, or dynamic roles. But in the bigger scheme, besides that, I mean, that would be like the freshman version of how we stay out of each other's way. But the senior version is love and trust and care, and that takes time to build. As a studio musician, you sometimes have to, you know, play as if that's true of somebody that you've known, you know, for less than an hour. Uh, but in the case of Rich and I, it's really there. Um, we've known each other through lots of phases of each other's lives, different relationships, living in different cities, gigs, that each other's had. And so on, ups and downs, and so it's just a thing that we've built.
So Adam, how are you doing on time? I just want to make sure we are being respectful of your time. Is another 20 good?
Yeah,
Okay,
totally.
perfect. I just want to make
Thanks
sure.
for asking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, so you have been making content for the last 10 years with your Adam Levy's guitar tips. You are very active on your Instagram. But the thing I do love about you is you have and I don't want this to come across the wrong way because I'm a fan of your stuff, but you have a very like low production quality but high content approach where you're not pulling out crazy 3-point lighting and pulling out a $50,000 camera to shoot a 60-second clip and it's edited perfectly. You let the flaws come in, and you have but the thing is you're also very consistent. You consistently posting, and I love it because I think a lot of people assume in order to have any sort of success on social media you need to the perfect lighting, the perfect editing, the perfect stuff, and you are an example where if, as you showed us, you just stay consistent and you know your audience, you can grow. So my question is, how do you approach content creation?
Wow. Um, uh, I mean, it's really a interesting question for me because I started doing this something like 10 years ago. I started doing stuff on YouTube, and the whole intention at the time, I already kind of thought of myself as avuncular.
What does that mean?
uh,
That's a pretty big word there. What does that mean? I'm sorry.
um, that's okay. Uncle like.
Okay.
I'd already been playing a long time, done stuff in the music business for what felt like a long time. Now it's funny to say that because this is 10 more
Yeah.
years down the road. And I just wanted to share stuff on, so, not here's how to play, you know, some Red Hot Chili Pepper song or whatever, but like, here's stuff that I've figured out the hard way. And I'm glad to share it with you. And that's what Guitar Tips started as. And for a long time, I did it every week in, week out, even if I was on the road or doing stuff or whatever. I try to just have something to share. And it's, of course, 10 years is a long time. It's taken different shapes. I've lived in different cities. I've shot it in different rooms on different cameras, all kinds of stuff. And then, I have kind of a on and off relationship with it. I don't do it every week now, but some weeks I might post two things, and then I might post nothing for a little bit. I guess it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to like really grow your channel, then I think it seems like what people say is just be consistent, which comes right back to what we're talking about at the beginning about practicing. It's like, it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to make a movie every week, but whatever you decide you want to do, think of something you can do once a week um, without too much stress, and just do it every week, week in, week out, or every day if that's what you want to do, or whatever it is. And consistency is, I think, important. But the way that I think about it now, sometimes I overthink it and then I don't do anything because I get in my head about, well, what can I possibly say that somebody else hasn't already said about the guitar on YouTube? What can I say? But that is exactly the question. But when I get into that headspace, I'm looking at it the wrong way. Like, if I ask myself, what can I say that hasn't already been said on YouTube? I'm probably not likely to do anything. But that is the question. What can I say, me, Adam Levy, what can I offer that hasn't been already talked to death about on on YouTube about the guitar? And it turns out there's still a few things. I just posted a thing this week about chords. I try to do stuff that's interesting to me. I'm not like doing research on what are the most searched terms for guitar stuff. Like that would probably be smart. I don't whatever I know about the questions that people have, it's not because I looked it up online. Like, what are the guitar questions people like? I know it because my students ask me, like, how do I learn the notes on the fretboard? I know that people want to know because I've been asked that question by students an infinite number of times, and so on. So I get feedback from real students, or what sometimes I'll do a live stream and I see the questions that people ask, and I'll do something about that. Um, I try to share stuff that is uh, interesting to me, that was kind of an aha moment for me that I learned from. And then I also just now try to share some stuff that works in a short format. Uh, I've done some, shorts and reels and stuff. I started doing this series of 5 records that made me, where I
Mhm.
try in 1 minute to talk. So I guess the short answer. I'm not good at short answers. In case you haven't figured
That's
it
why
out
it's a
by now.
podcast, man. That's why you're
Yeah.
here.
um, I of course I care what people are interested in. I don't mean to say that, but I'm just trying to say, like, I'm not somebody like a real YouTuber like Mr. Beast, or somebody who's like done endless research on what kind of thumbnails work and what kind of titles work and how to pace everything so all the beats are in the right place. Like, I have no idea how any of that stuff really works. But I hope that by sharing stuff that either genuinely fascinates me and or is based on real questions that I've had repeatedly from real students who are studying the guitar and stuff, that at least I'm hitting something that's valuable beyond you know my mom watching it, or whatever. And little by little, that's how I've gotten to grow to where I am. It's still a small channel, if I mean, in the world of guitar YouTube, but
I
that
don't
is the question.
I don't know, man.
What
26,000 is pretty good. Like, I mean, as of recording this right now, Rhinestone has 165 followers. We're growing
Oh
rapidly,
man.
but
Yeah, well, just keep doing it. Be consistent. Keep showing up. Uh, have great guests like Greg Howe. I watched some of that. That was great.
thank you.
Um, uh, but that is really the question at this point. Or maybe it's like, what can you do? What can you share that is doesn't mean that nobody else has shared it, but what is your point of view, and where does that I've destroyed this paperclip now. This is my prop guitar pick,
That's
and now
right.
I don't think I could use it
It's
now.
ADHD fidgeting.
Yeah. Anyway, you'll find your audience, I'm sure. I'm sure you will.
Hey everybody, that is our podcast. Thank you so much, Adam Levy, for coming on the podcast and gracing us with your knowledge and your wisdom. We learned so many amazing things about what it takes to be in the studio. I really love the fact that he talked about how you need to be ready for anything when you're in the studio. And a lot of times, you need to be able to hear something once and play it back, and how important of a skill that is. And it's one of the reasons he is such in demand. He is such a loved studio musician. People love him. And God, that story about Vulfpeck, 2 takes and they were out, right? Wild, crazy stuff. Anyway, guys, our intro and outro song, as always, is Target Rockstar by Maddie Music Madness. Let's see, for the ad 1 would be Down the Hall Waiting by Zach Alexander. And ad number 2 is Drunk Driving Tow Truck Driver by Slim Pickens. All those songs were fully produced by Rhinestone Productions. You can check them out on YouTube, wherever. And then my name is Banner Driscoll. You can find me, my name is Banner Driscoll. You can find me online, Banner Driscoll Media, wherever, Instagram, TikTok, blah, blah, blah. But if you have any questions about anything to do with the podcast, anything about guests or anything like that, please hit me up, rhinestonemusic@gmail.com, RHYNESTONE music@gmail.com. I'd really appreciate it if you guys would check it out. And the last thing, if this interview was informative to you, if this interview was inspiring to you, if you learned anything about this interview, I would love it if you guys could hit that subscribe button. That tells people that we are valid. It gives public validation, and that helps us get better and better guests. We've had some clips go very viral lately, 50,000 views and up kind of thing. And honestly, it's as great as that is. If we don't have a subscriber count, it's a lot harder, because that's what people are looking for. That's what the press agents are looking for. And someday I want to have a great, these amazing guests on who I want to interview. I'd love to talk to, I'm trying to think of someone massive who I'd love to talk to. Stevie Wonder. I would love to talk to Stevie Wonder for an hour, right? Could we make that happen? Well, it'd definitely be a lot easier if we have more subscribers, right? So let's try to get Stevie Wonder on this podcast. I would love it if you guys could hit that subscribe button, tell your friends about it, share it, put it out in the news. I don't know, whatever. I'm just out here interviewing musicians, man, and just trying to make the world a better place. But anyway, if anything we can do to help, hit us up, rhinestonemusic@gmail.com, RHYNESTONE music@gmail.com. And until next time, guys, happy music making.